Hi everyone, it's Mrs. Griffin with the Unit 3 Lesson 7 video where we're going to be constructing and solving problems about midsegments. And both triangles and trapezoids have midsegments. So to begin, on this first example, we're going to construct a midsegment for the triangle by following these directions. So we have to construct a midpoint for AB and for AC. So to construct a midpoint for AB, we're going to go to A. We're going to do a perpendicular bisector, so open our compass more than halfway and do an arc above and below, or to each side of the line, and then flip around to B and do the same thing. And then to do the perpendicular bisector, we are going to put the line that connects those two intersections we created, and that will help us locate the midpoint of AB, which it says to label X, because respectively means in the same order listed. So AB goes with X. Okay, next we're going to do the same thing for AC. So we're going to go to A, open more than halfway between A and C, and swing the arc above and below. So A, and then flip around to C, and keeping the compass the same, do another arc. And that will be the perpendicular bisector of AC, and that will get us midpoint Y. And then finally, it says that we are going to connect X and Y. And that segment is your midsegment, XY. So a midsegment connects midpoints of two sides of a triangle. Okay, so the midsegment joins the two sides of a triangle. In a trapezoid, we're going to have that happen as well, and often they'll call that a median or a midsegment. It's the same thing. But in a triangle, the midsegment will always be parallel to the third side and half its length. And in the trapezoid, it's equal to the average of the bases. Okay, so we're going to construct the midsegment of trapezoid ABCD. Going to go to the non-parallel sides and find each of their midpoints. So between A and D, we're going to do our perpendicular bisector, opening more than halfway, and drawing our arc, and then flipping it around, and the same thing here. And where they intersect will help us find the midpoint. And then we're going to do the same thing on side BC, the other non-parallel. And opening more than halfway, swinging the arc, flipping it around to B, doing the same thing, and connecting to find the midpoint. And then taking those two midpoints there and connecting them to one another. So that gets you the midsegment. And in a trapezoid, also known as a median, but we're going to say midsegment from here on out. And it does say to label this one EF. Okay, going on. When we have a midsegment in a triangle, we know that it's a midsegment because we know that it says D and E are the midpoints. So these are midpoints, D and E. And because they're connected, DE is a midsegment. Now, there are several things that happen. It is now parallel to the third side and half its length. So DE is going to be half of BC. All right, so then we're going to find some of our answers. So if DE was 10, then CB would have to be 20. If BC is 28, then DE would have to be 14, half of it. If DE was 4x, then CB would be 8x. If CB, the longer one, was 10x minus 2, DE would be half of that, 5x minus 1. Okay, and then for part E, we're actually going to have to solve to find x. So we're going to label what they tell us. DE is 3x plus 7, and CB is 8x minus 6. And we're going to set up an equation. Now, because we know DE is half of BC, you can double it, 2 times 3x plus 7, and set it equal to the larger one, 8x minus 6. And then you can solve that equation. So just like we did for our centroid, we can double the small to equal the large. You can also set up that equation, the small over large proportion, or large over small proportion, where you then cross multiply, and it helps keep straight which one gets doubled. Okay, then you can solve. So distribute. Okay, we're going to subtract 6x from both sides, add 6 to both sides, solve for x, and you get 10. Going on to this next one. If G, H, and I are all midpoints, then we have multiple mid-segments going on here. Because G and H are midpoints, then GH is a mid-segment that's parallel and half for BC. IH is parallel to and half of AC, and GI is parallel to and half of AB. Alright, so using those concepts of parallel, we can actually figure out some of the other angle measurements. So if you look at one at a time, let's start with the yellow. You can use some of the corresponding angles to find different measurements. So if I pull up this transversal, then I can see that this angle here would also be 40 because they're corresponding. A is a transversal instead, we can do a corresponding to pull the 61 upward. Focus in on a different pair of transversal and parallel lines, for example, this set. Now what I can do is focus on one of these transversals, for example, GH, and then I can see that I have a Z shape here. And so the Z shape can bring this 40 over here as well. And then do the same thing with that 61 using this Z shape here to put 61 here as well. And then I have a triangle, and triangles have to add up to 180 degrees. So 61 plus 40 and then subtract from 180 would get me 79 degrees. Okay. Now we have segments labeled again instead of angles, so we have our 2-to-1 ratio again. So if I double the smaller portion, it should equal the larger, and then I can solve. So 6x plus 2 would equal to 7x minus 3, and then x would equal 5. For number 4, similarly, if AB is 5, remember the one it's parallel to, FE would be half of it, so it would be 2.5. If AC is 10, then the one parallel to it, DE, would be half of that, which would be 5. And if BC is 13, then the one parallel to it would be half of it, 6.5. And we would be able to find the perimeter of that triangle by adding all of those together. So 5 plus 6.5 plus 2.5 equals 14. Okay. Also keep in mind that because D, E, and F are all midpoints, those measurements would go here as well, if you ever did need them to find a perimeter of something different. Okay, number 5, we have some midpoints, so we know we have a mid-segment, which means that x and 30 are the parallels, and x would be half of 30, so it would be 15. Okay, and then the perimeter of triangle ABC, we'd have to use some of those midpoints. So the 9 that's here would also go here, and the 10 here would also go here. And so this side would be 18, this one would be 20, and this one would be 30. If it's ABC, remember you only use the outer numbers. So when we add together 18, 20, and the 30, we're going to get 68. Okay, now for a trapezoid, instead, we're going to be looking for AB. The trapezoid, you're going to take that mid-segment, and it is equal to the average of the bases. So we're going to do 9 plus 13 over 2. We're going to add them together and divide by 2. That's how you average. Okay, and that would be 22 over 2, which is 11. Okay, if you're looking for one of the bases, you have to think of it exactly the way I said in order to set up your equation correctly. the midsegment is equal to base plus base over 2. So we are going to take our midsegment, which is 19, and our two bases, 13 plus x, and divide by 2. And then you can cross multiply by putting the 19 over 1. So 13 plus x would equal 19 times 2, which is 38. And then if you were to subtract your 13 from both sides, you would get that x is 25. Okay, additionally, you can do this similar to how we do our midpoint problems, as long as it's just numbers. So you can say, how do I get from 13 to 19? I have to add 6, and if I add 6 again, I would get 25. So as long as it's just numbers, that will work. Okay, here it's not just numbers, so you don't really want to do that. You want to set up the equation. So the midsegment is equal, to base 1 plus base 2 over 2. And then you can cross multiply and solve. So negative x plus 21 times 2, don't forget you're going to distribute that 2 in, and get negative 2x plus 42 equals, and then you have 1 times 11 plus 17, which is 28. You're going to subtract your 42 from both sides and get negative 14. And then when you divide by negative 2, you'll get 7. And it did just want the value of x, so we're done. For number 6D, the midsegment is equal to the average, so add up and divide by 2. All right, and then cross multiply. So don't forget, when you multiply this by 2, you're distributing. So you're going to have 14x minus 8 is equal to, and then 1 times 38 plus 6x minus 6, you can combine those and get 6x plus 32. 6x from both sides and add 8 to both sides, and then when you divide by 8, x is 5. And again, it did just want the value of x. All right, I will see you in class.